Right, so today we're going to do an LS400. It's a 1UZ VVT-i, so it's 98 to 2000. This one is going into an Altezza that originally had a 3SGE in from 01 to 05, and the customer's using a J160 gearbox on. So let's get into it. Right, so as discussed, it's a 1UZ-FE VVT-i from LS400 from 98 to 2000, going into an Altezza, which had a 3SGE and it was a 01 to 05 vehicle. Customer's using a J160 gearbox. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go through the entire layout of the harness, so obviously the customer can know exactly where everything plugs in and how everything gets connected up there. So starting in the ECU box, now I do appreciate it is a bit of a mess in here, but that's because we're converting an IS200 to an Altezza. So obviously he's going to have his two plugs over here, which are going to connect directly into the resin over there. I've got a patch to convert it over there. We've then got our MPX device that's translating the MPX from the 1UZ ECU to work with the IS200 Altezza clocks. We've then got the ATEMU device, which is obviously emulating all the automatic gearbox codes to keep the ECU happy. And then finally, you've got your plugs that go into your ECU. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all in a row. Again, these are all different plugs, so you can't mix them up. And then lastly, we've got our gray plug over there. In terms of the body section, you've got your gray plug, which is going to go into there. You've got your black plug, which is going to go into there. And then you've got this white plug, which goes into the blue plug over there. Now, obviously, we've had to adapt from these two plugs to the IS200. So that's what these little sort of extra plugs you see over here. So don't stress about those. All right. Coming along, then you've got your grommet. So your grommet's going to slide obviously directly into there, and your lid's going to go back on top of the ECU box there. In this case, because the 1UZ, the harness comes out of the back of the engine, this is obviously going to run along here, and then it's going to come up towards the back of the engine. So to start with, once it gets to the back here, you're going to end up at this big piece of plastic, and this is obviously housing the harness, and it keeps it all in place. So you'll see there's a mounting point there, there's a mounting point there, and there's a mounting point there. Now obviously we have an LS430 engine. This is an LS430 engine. The water bridges are slightly different because of the way the coolant hoses are run. So you see this doesn't actually sit flush because the coolant hose is here. On a 1UZ VVT-i, the two pipes are over there. So that's why this isn't mounted down. But if you're putting on a 1UZ VVT-i, all those mount points will be there for you to screw it down to, all right? Now then, coming out of the plastic section over here, at the back here, we've got only a few wires. So number one, we've got our earth straps, and these go down to the M8 holes. So you've got an M8 bolt in there holding that down. The M6 at the top is there on a 1UZ VVT-i, but it's not used. It's used for the 3UZ VVT-is, all right? Next up, we've got our Lambda sensor. So that's coming out of here, going down to the bottom over there. And do remember, you've got a metal shield that gets bolted on here. That needs to be in place because obviously that's protecting the connector from the exhaust heat. Okay, so just make sure that that little metal shield is there, otherwise the plug's not going to last very long. Then we've got our gearbox harness. So in this case, it's just running across to there because we're going to be doing all the testing on the gearbox as part of the testing section. But it runs along there. There is our little reverse plug, and then our speed sensor just underneath the piece of paper there. All right. Then you've got your what I call sub harness. It's basically your starter and your knock. So this one goes to your starter solenoid and your knock sensors, which are under the V-bank over there. And then lastly, you've got your main power. So your main power is obviously coming out here, and it's going to the positive terminal of your battery. All right, so that's this little back section over here. What we're going to do now is we're going to come up here and we're going to carry on over there. So it just comes out, makes a 90-degree bend over there, and then it comes into the next piece of plastic, and that gets bolted on down there and there. Now coming out of here at the back, you're going to have injector 7 and coil 7. So remember, this is the left bank. You're always looking from the driver's viewpoint. So this is the left bank. That is the right bank. Left bank is cylinder 1, 3, 5, and 7. Right bank is cylinder 2, 4, 6, and 8. Okay, so just to get out of the way. So we're coming out here. This first little section which comes out the back here is going to be injector 7 and coil 7. Then coming further along, you've got this section over here. Now that's going to have injector 5 and coil 5. Then coming a little bit further along there, then we're going to have the cam sensor for the left bank cam sensor there. We're also going to have coil 3 and injector 3 coming out there. Coming out the front over here, we've got a little noise filter, and that obviously plugs into the noise filter, which is usually on the top of the inlet manifold over there. Just tuck that away in there for now. All right. Then coming further along here, then we're going to have another breakout towards the front here. Now coming out there, you're going to have injector 1, you're going to have coil 1. You're going to have your oil control valve for the left bank, so that's your VVT-i oil control valve. Then coming a little bit further along here, you're going to break out to your sub TPS. So on the 1UZ VVT-i, because the TPS sensor is all the way down in there, Toyota actually made a little sub harness, which is this grey plug. So your engine harness plugs into the grey plug, which then makes its way down to the TPS sensor. We then also have the APS, or accelerated position sensor. That comes along the top over here and plugs into the other side over there. So remember, this is drive-by-wire. Even though there is a cable going to it, it is drive-by-wire. There's plenty of videos about that. And if I can find one, I'll put a link at the top there for you. Okay, then we're going to come a little bit further down over here. Then it's going to break out over here, and that's going to be your drive-by-wire motor and clutch. So that's this 4-pin plug over here. It's also going to break out for your cam sensor on the front. Then the harness is going to carry on down here, and you'll see you've got a clip point there and a clip point there. So your harness will just clip in place over there to keep it out of the way. And then we're going to come down to over here, and it's going to break out into 3 sections. So first of all, we've got our AC, okay? So now that actually goes into there. So you can use the LS400 1UZ VVT-i aircon pump. That'll plug in and all work. Obviously, you've got to pipe everything up to your system, basically. The other section that splits out here is going to go down to the oil. So in this case, you can see there's a gap in there. It comes down through there. Now in this case, because we are actually using an LS430 engine, we've got this oil filter housing which brings it forward. You would have one going back, so you would just come out over here and then boom, make your way to the switch, which will be at the back over here. The other section that's going to come down over here and make its way down into there and down over there, that is your crank sensor. So that plugs in over there at the bottom. So that's the 3 sections that come out over here. All right, so that pretty much covers this whole side of the engine. Let's make our way over to the other side, and we'll carry on at the back there. So, as I said, you've got your plastic piece over here. As you come along here, you're going to notice a little breakout down here. Again, earth strap bolts into the M8 hole over there. You're not using the M6 because that's a 3UZ. So M8 hole over there. And then coming along here, on your first section where the plastic ends, you're going to break out to injector 8 and coil 8. Then it's going to come a little bit further along. It's going to break out to go to ACIS, or acoustic control induction system. What I'll do is I'll put a little link up there. I've done a video on exactly how this all works and everything. One thing to take into account when you guys are doing this is when you are pulling your intake off to put your sub harness in, so to the 2 NOx systems and everything, it's definitely worthwhile to go and check the solenoid underneath the intake, because that's where this plugs into. If it doesn't work, your ACIS system doesn't work, you lose a lot of low down torque. So while everything is off, just supply power and ground. It is polarity sensitive, so just make sure you get it the correct way, and then you can test the solenoid while the intake is off. If it's broken, replace it, nice and easy, and then you put the intake back on and you don't feel like taking it off again. So little people advice in regards to that one. Right, next thing it's going to break out is obviously injector 6 and coil 6. Then the harness is going to come along a little bit further there. Now obviously there are sort of bolt holes here and here that you can P-clip and mount the harness to there. But that section over there, now you're going to break out to your cam sensor for your right bank. You're going to break out to coil 4, and you're going to break out to injector 4 over there. Okay. So I've just got the injectors just pressed on because obviously a part of testing we pulled them all off. Then you're going to come a little bit further over here, and then you're going to break out to injector 2, coil 2. You then break out to the coolant temp sensor, which is just over there. You also break out to the oil control valve for the right bank in this case. And you're going to come a little bit further along here, and then we're going to break out to our mass airflow sensor. So again, these are the mass airflow sensor housings from Calvin from Car Tuning in New Zealand. We are stocking these, so if you guys need them, just let us know, and obviously we can organize everything from here. But we are carrying stock now in the UK of those. Coming down along here, we're then going to break out at the bottom here, and we're breaking out for the alternator. So remember on the 1UZ VVT-i, they had a sub harness that went underneath that included all like the alternator and oil plug and everything. We're now actually building them into the main harness, so they're no longer a separate harness altogether. So you've got your 3-pin plug for your alternator plugs in there. In this case, we've got our oil level sensor. Now obviously you see we've got an LS430 mid sump, and the LS400 has a front sump, so this obviously just goes into the front sump over there. Okay, and then lastly, going down, we're breaking out to our Lambda sensor. So again, this is the only Lambda sensors that we are using. It's just the main ones that go into the exhaust manifolds. We're not using the secondary ones that go after the catalytic converters. Okay, right, so that is the entire layout there. Obviously we've been through everything where everything plugs in. It is really well organized, so you'll see like at each section where it breaks out, that only goes to certain things that are right by the section where it breaks out. So obviously it should be relatively straightforward to get it all plugged in. So what we're going to do now is, now that we've gone through the entire layout, we're going to move over to the testing. So what I like to do is I just like to get it warmed up a little bit, just so we can see the temperature gauge obviously working inside the car. So I'm going to do that now, and then we'll come back and do some testing. All right, see you in a second. Right, so now we're going to do the actual testing part of it, and that obviously involves starting the engine up, etc. So what are we going to be testing? Obviously, because it's an i200 plug and play, it is quite an extensive list, because a lot of things inside the car that should be working. So to start off with, we're looking at the ambient temperature. So that's the little temperature inside the car that displays the outside temp. Because it's a 1UZ VVT-i and it does actually have MPX natively, that temperature is actually sensed and it will read correctly on that one. We're going to be looking at the charge light, so we're going to make sure that comes up on the dash. We're going to be looking at the reverse, so that means I'm going to bridge the reverse switch over here, and that's going to then beep on the dash, like, so we know the whole circuit inside the car is working correctly. We'll then look at the speedo. So what we're going to do is basically we're going to feed a signal into the speed sensor plug over here, and that's going to show us that from the plug all the way to the dash, the whole speed signal is actually working. We're going to do OBD2 test. So what does that mean? I'm just going to plug in my OBD2 machine, make sure it does actually communicate with the vehicle itself. Then we're going to do a fuel pump test. So in other words, I'm going to use the OBD2 machine to activate the fuel pump. Now this is a 1UZ VVT-i, so the ECU is controlling the fuel pump. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a little section at the top there with a link where I explain exactly how these fuel pump systems work and the variances among different models, etc. All right, so if you want to watch that, feel free. Then we're going to test the AC clutch. So what are we going to do? We're going to make sure that obviously when I press the button inside the car for AC, that the actual OBD2 machine picks it up. And then obviously what we'll do is we'll activate the AC magnetic clutch relay from the OBD2 machine, and we should hear the relay down in the corner there click, so we know the whole system is working exactly as it should. Remember, the AC system is completely wired as standard. It does require the pressure switch, which is part of your AC system, so it doesn't work if your AC doesn't have any pressure in. So just bear that in mind. You still have to have the whole complete circuit set up correctly. All right. Once we've done that, we're going to move into the fact that we're actually going to start the engine. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the starter circuit. I've got these mixed around. So we're going to look at the starter circuit. That's plain and simple. We just want to make sure when we put the key in the barrel and we turn it to start, the engine starts, because everything is plugged into the car. So we know then when you get it that you're just going to put the key in, crank it over, and she will start as long as everything is connected up there. All right. Then we're going to test the drive-by-wire. So all we're basically going to do is just turn the throttle a little bit, because as we know, this is like the early drive-by-wire system. So as you can hear, I'm not moving the throttle blade at all until I get to here, and then hopefully you can hear that. So if I just turn it like this and it revs, we know the drive-by-wire system is working exactly as we intended to, so we'll be happy with that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the back of the engine here. So this is the ACIS. So what we want to see is as it starts up, this valve moves to closed. Okay, I put the link in earlier for the ACIS system. So again, if you want to do that, you can go back to that, and then you can see exactly how that works. Right, then we're going to test the oil control valve. So what we're going to do is go back to our OBD2 machine. We're going to then actually physically test them, so it'll cause the cams to retard. The engine will sound very lumpy as I test each side, and we'll make sure those are working as we expected. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run around the engine, and I'm going to remove each injector one by one, and as I do, we're going to hear it misfire, so I know that every single cylinder is firing exactly as we expect it to. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the tacho. Now, because this is actually going into an Altezza, and the 1UZ already gives out a 4-cylinder signal, we're not converting the signal, so the actual RPM gauge will read really low because it's a 6-cylinder clocks, and we're giving out a 4-cylinder signal from the 1UZ VVT-i. And then we're going to look at the coolant temp, which is probably going to already work, because obviously I ran it up already, so you'll actually see the coolant temp rise when we go and look at all these like charge lights, etc, etc. All right, we're obviously not looking for the oil lights, because in this case he's running an Altezza, so he's going to be swapping his oil pressure switch out for an actual pressure sender, because obviously the Altezza has an actual oil pressure gauge in there, so we don't have the oil pressure light like we do on IS200. All right, so as it's plug and play, it's super nice and simple. Once you've plugged everything inside the car, you're just going to put the key in, and then you're literally going to turn it on. As I turn it on, you're going to see we've got our charge light over there, we've got our check engine light over there, so we know the ECU is turning on. You can actually see ever so slightly that the coolant temp gauge is actually off the needle there now, so that is working as we expect it to. But let's start from the beginning. We're going to go over to ambient temp. So as you can see there now, it's displaying 13 degrees. Remember, this is actually sensed, so it will go up and down as the outside temperature goes up and down. So that's all fine. Charge light we've already been through, so let's move on to reverse. So I'm just going to grab myself a little piece of wire here, and all I'm going to do is literally bridge this switch, or bridge the plug, and as I do, you're going to hear the usual ACIS beeping. So again, I'm just bridging that, which is exactly what your reverse switch does. And as I remove it, the beeping goes away. Fantastic. Right, so now we're going to move over to the speedo. So again, what I'm doing is it's just our little simple converter device. So we use these like for the 3UZs when we convert a 4-cylinder signal to a 6-cylinder signal. It also has a test function, so I can obviously test an output. What we do as well is this is what we call a Hall effect style sensor. So in other words, it requires 12 volts, a ground, and the signal comes out already processed. So what I'm doing is I'm providing power and ground from the plug to make sure that those are working, so I know all the way up to the plug here that we've got the 12 volts and the ground's correct. And you can see the LED is flashing. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to quickly put it into test mode, which is always fun with only one set of hands. Right, so now we're in test mode. So what are we going to do? I'm going to feed the yellow wire, which is the output signal. I'm going to feed it into this sensor plug here, and you're going to see the speedo shoot up. So what I'm going to do is try and hold the camera on the speedo, and as I touch it, see, there you go. So I'm just feeding the signal in, and I'll just pull it out, and there goes the signal, and I'll just put it back in again, and there goes the signal. Fantastic. All right, so I'm super happy with that. I know that everything from this plug all the way to the clocks is 100%, and everything works exactly as it should. Right, so let's go over to the OBD2 machine and have a look at that. So I'm just going to pick this up and put it over here for now. Okay, so this machine takes absolutely ages to load, so I've already obviously checked that it does work. So I'm just going to go into function. I'm going to go into system select, and then you're going to see that it says LS400. So it is actually picking up that it's an LS400. Now this is just connected to the BOGO standard OBD2 plug, which is underneath the driver's foot panel. So there's no extra plug on the harness. It's using the existing stuff that's already in the car. Just plug straight in there like you would normally do when you had an ACIS200, ACIS300, or an Altezza. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to have a quick look over here, because all we want to see really is some data coming through to know that it is actually connected to the ECU. So you'll see there we've got coolant temp 47 degrees, intake air 17 degrees, throttle position 16%, etc., etc. Okay, so we're happy some data is coming through, so I'm happy that that is working exactly as I expected to. Next up, fuel pump relay. So now we're going to go into active test. Sorry, the lights in the workshop are very bright. I'm going to hopefully try and get it in there. So again, you see we've got fuel pump relay, fuel pump. If you watched my video, you'll understand exactly why that is. Okay, obviously I want to test the fuel pump over here. Now when I press this arrow, it's going to turn on the fuel pump. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move over, because effectively the relay is inside that little relay box by the battery. So 1, 2, 3. So you can hear the relay clicking there. So that's the circuit opening relay. In this case, is actually the fuel pump relay. But again, if you watch my video, you'll know exactly why that is. Okay. So fuel pump is working absolutely fine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to the AC clutch. So effectively what I'm going to do now is scroll down to my data list. We should have AC signal. So you see AC signal. Where is it now? AC signal is now off. So what I'm going to do is, let me see if I can tilt this up so the lights don't affect it so much. Okay, if I hold you there, I'm going to press the AC button. See, AC signal now is turned to on. So I was just pressing the button over there. If I press the button off there, you'll see AC signal will then go to off. Fantastic. So our little MPX device is doing its job. It's converting the MPX AC request signal from there, and the ECU is now receiving it and accepting that as a signal. Right, what we're going to do is we're now going to go over to the AC magnetic clutch relay. So you can see the AC magnetic clutch relay. So remember, the ECU is controlling the AC clutch. So as soon as I press this button, you're going to hear the relay click. Now for interest, the AC relays are actually in the front over here. So what I'm going to try and do is hold the camera over the top of the engine. I'm going to press that button and we should hear the relay click. So if you bear with me a second, I'm just going to do some gymnastics here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Right, fantastic. So that's working exactly as I expected to. So as long as you got everything plumbed up, as long as your pressures are all alright, the AC system should work absolutely fine. No issues there at all. Right, so that's the bits that we're going to test now with just the ignition on. So now we move over to this pack that we actually started. Okay, so just a quick recap of what we're going to do when we started, because it makes a hell of a noise. I'm just going to go through these and then I'm just going to go through them there. Sometimes you can hear me, sometimes you can't, but I'll just keep talking as we go through. So we're testing the starter circuit. Boom, that's just going to be make sure that it starts with a key. Drive-by-wire, we're just going to rev it. We're going to check the back of the engine, make sure the ACIS valve closes. We're then going to test both oil control valves with the OBD2 machine. I'll then run around and pull out all the injectors. Remember, these injectors are just pushed on, they're not clipped in. So if I start it up and it starts misfiring, you'll see me try and just push down whichever one is causing the misfire over there. Just a heads up. We'll look at the tacho signal. Okay, and then we'll look at the coolant temp, which we can see already the coolant temp's up, but by the time I've run the engine for a bit, hopefully it's gone up a little bit more so you can actually see it climbing. All right, so without further delay, let's get into it. So what I'm going to do is, again, nice and simple, you're just going to get in your car, put your key in, and you're going to start it. 1, 2, 3. There you go. All right, so that, let's move from there to there, down there. So let's move over to the oil control valves. So VVT control bank 1. Okay, so that's bank 1. Let's go do bank 2. Right, that's all good. Let's move on to the injectors. So we'll start with number 2, number 4, number 6, number 8. Right, let's go around the other side. We'll start number 7, number 5. Number 3 and number 1. Get back on again. Fantastic. Right, so we've done that. So we can see we're getting a tacho signal through. Alright. We can see our coolant temp gauge is starting to rise. You can see it's off the needle over there. Okay, I'm just going to flick this off. Just going to flick this on. Right, so there was one thing, and I don't know why I haven't put it on the list here, but it is diagnostics. Now, obviously you do have the OBD2 machine that you can connect to, but with the 1UZ VVT-i, there is actually another way to check codes, which is really, really nice and simple. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into DTCs, or diagnostic trouble codes, and I'm going to explain that there are a few that are going to be there for you. Oh, hang on, I think that's left over from the other one. Okay, hang on, let me just start it up and... Yeah. Right, okay. Right, so ones you should get is the bank 1 sensor 2 and the bank 2 sensor 2, all right? This fuel pump relay ECU circuit code should not be here. We will rectify that before it goes out. And then obviously these 3 over here, which is for the gearbox, 1755, 1760, and 1765. Now, those are the ones we can remove with the resistor. The thing is, it doesn't cause a check engine light, as you can see. So we'll just start it up and show you. Check engine light on. Check engine light off. Right, so even in its current state, you shouldn't have a check engine light unless you actually have a code that warrants the system to go into a limp mode. So at all times, you should only have the 2 at the top, which is basically the secondary sensors for the oxygen sensor. You then got these 3 for the gearbox. The rest of the gearbox are being taken care of by the Atomu device. We don't fit the resistors on because it actually doesn't affect the performance at all, and obviously it doesn't cause a check engine light, which is not the case in like an IS300 or a GS300. We do need to fit the resistors because those 3 codes do cause a check engine light. Now then, how do you check codes without a diagnostics machine? Really, really nice and simple. Now, I'm going to give a brief explanation from across the table. Obviously, some models will vary, but every single IS200, 300 Altezza has an OBD2 plug, and it is simple as getting a paper clip or a piece of wire, and you bridge pin 4 or 5 and 13. So basically 4 and 5 are grounds, 13 is TC, trouble codes, and what's going to happen is your dash is now going to flash the check engine light as we do that. Now, on some of the older model vehicles, so you might find your Altezza from 98 to 2001, from your IS200 from 98 to 2001, you actually have this diagnostics plug at the front of the fuse box over here. So the later models one didn't have that. If you do have that, now again, obviously bridging these wires and trying to look at the check engine light is easy for me because I just pulled it out and look at it, but in most cases it's going to be easier just to go to the OBD2 plug and bridge those 2 terminals. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab myself a piece of wire, all right, and I'm going to bridge these 2 terminals. So inside here it's exactly the same procedure. You'll see in the top here is a pinout. You've got E1, which is this one over here in the top corner there, and then you've got TC, which is this middle one over here. So nice and easy. All I'm going to do is I'm going to bridge that, and as I do that I'm just going to go over to the check engine light because you can actually physically see it flashing there. So it's going to go boom, it's going to go off, and you're going to see all the flashing lights there, and you can hear the throttle body node change. So you can see 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So that's 27. So that's the bank 1 sensor 2, and you got 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. That's 29. That's bank 2 sensor 2, and it'll go on from there. And what you can do is once you depin it, or basically stop joining it together, you'll see the check engine light will flash for a bit, and then it's going to come on back solid once it's done its final code. And there you go. So now it's back on solid again. One thing to remember is with these codes, you're going to get exactly like you saw that you're going to get 2 slide pause 7 27, 2 slide pause 9 29. If you had like a math problem, that would be 31. So it'd go 1 2 3 pause 1, boom, that's 31. And so on. Once it's got to the end of all its codes, you'll have a really long pause and it'll start again. Okay. Now, I do have a video where I did with a harness on the bench that had one of our fuse boxes. I'm going to put a link up in there for that diagnostics video because the same thing applies because you're doing it in exactly the same way. Okay, so I'll put that link up there so you can see how I normally do diagnostics, especially with this sort of flashing check engine light code system on there. And obviously we've always got the list of codes available to you guys, so you can always just give us a shout and we'll tell you exactly what's what there. Okay. Another important thing about bridging those particular pins, you obviously heard the throttle body started making a different noise, or hopefully you did in the background over there. What it also does is it locks the timing on the engine at 10 degrees. Okay. So basically if you look down here, you'll see you've got 0, 5, 10 and 15 degree markings on here. On your crank pulley as well, you'll have a marking to check. So basically what they do is when you bridge that and you put it into diagnostic mode, you can then take a timing light to coil 1. Not all timing lights work being wrapped around the wires, but some do. But you can take a timing light over here and you can actually check the timing. So you can start it up, you can get it running, but it should be locked at 10 degrees. Why am I mentioning this? Because if you leave a paper clip inside the OBD2 connector or wire in there and you try and drive it around, it's going to be locked at 10 degrees. It doesn't care. It will continue to lock at 10 degrees to make sure that you can test it out. So please do not leave those terminals bridged when you go out driving, because obviously having only 10 degrees of timing is going to be rubbish and you're going to have absolutely no power whatsoever. All right, so do remember that. It's a really nice tool to use, because if you think you've slipped a tooth or something like that and you want to check it, you can literally grab a timing light, put it over there, bridge the 2 terminals, start up the engine, boom, and you can check your timing. If you are like 2 or 3 degrees out, then you can pull all the covers off and start checking the physical markings of the timing on the engine itself. All right, just a nice quick easy test you can do before that. But that is pretty much it for all the testing. I'm happy with absolutely everything and it is working exactly as I expected to. So what we'll do now We'll get this all boxed up, get it off to Johnny Irwin to fit for the customer. And everybody else, if you've got any questions, again, feel free to put a comment down below. You can get us on our Facebook page at Phoenix Engine Management. And yeah, if you any questions you want, or any videos you want on certain technical aspects that you've seen here, please let us know, and we'll try and get that done the next time we get a harness in. But thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.